to learn about many cultures. For that reason, membership in the museum can offer you many unlimited visits per year for individuals or families. Of special interest to active or retired military families is our special program supported by APS to offer free admission to those who serve our country and their families. I'm very grateful for your participation in today's special program, and I look forward to seeing you here again soon, over and over. And now, please welcome Dr. Janet Baker, our Curator of Asian Art. Janet.
Thank you, Amada. And welcome to everyone today. Sat Shri Akal. It has been my honor and pleasure to serve as Curator of Asian Art at Phoenix Art Museum for 18 years. During this time, I have learned so much about the history and religious faiths of Asia. At no time has it been more wonderful than it has been for the past 2 years, during which time I have been able to see and learn about artifacts and history of the Sikh faith in India and the world. Through incredible generosity, Phoenix Art Museum has become the second U.S. museum with a dedicated Sikh art gallery, but ours is the largest. Today we are here to recognize some special aspects of the Sikh faith in its relationship to war. Through the expertise of our special guests, we will hear firsthand how the tenets of their faith and principles of justice, the fight of oppression, and the duty of service on the battlefield have played out over the past century and beyond. Nowhere has that been expressed more beautifully in the film we are about to see today. To introduce the film, All Quiet on the Home Front, I have the great privilege of welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Kamal Singh Kalsi. Dr. Kalsi trained in osteopathic medicine and joined the U.S. Army in 2001 with a specialization in EMS and disaster medicine. He has served in active and reserve duty and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011, receiving a Bronze Medal Star for his service there. Lieutenant Colonel Kalsi became the first Sikh to be granted religious accommodation in the U.S. military in nearly a generation. In his spare time, I'm not sure when that is, but in his spare time, Dr. Kalsi advocates for civil liberties with regards to religious freedom. He has been featured in Time, CNN, BBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Stars and Stripes, NPR, PBS, and many other news outlets. He has been an honored guest at both the White House and the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Kalsi is a Truman Fellow, serving on the Defense Council of the Truman National Security Project, and was awarded their Innovation in Policy Award. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Kamal Singh Kalsi.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Thank you to the Museum Board of Directors. Thank you, Dr. Kanuja. Thank you to the wonderful and amazing Phoenix community that's come out today to support this project and so much more. That was a really long bio. And I know my wife's getting tired of it. We started this fight way back in 2001. The Army actually came to my medical school my first year. They said, hey, do you want to join the Army? Not the Air Force, but we still love the Air Force. But I said, yeah, I'm happy to join the Army because I come from 4 generations of military. My father and grandfather both in the Indian Air Force. My great-grandfather was in the Royal British Army. And at that time I said, look, I'll serve, but I serve like this, with turban and beard. And they said, no problem. At least the recruiter said no problem. So I signed the contract. I took my oath as an officer in the Army. And for the next 7 years, I sort of flew under the radar and never had any issue. And then it wasn't until 2008 when I had to start to go on to active duty, wherein I called up the Army and I said, look, I have a turban and beard. I've been on rotations in the Army and I haven't had any trouble. Just want to let you know I have a turban and beard. And they said, no problem. Again, second time. But then a month later, I got a very different phone call. They said, look, we actually looked into the regs, and it is going to be a problem. So you can either take off your turban and cut your hair, or offer to pay back the loans that they paid for medical school. I said, I'm not giving you your money back. I'm willing to serve. So it was actually a very amicable conversation we had with the military. And for the next year and a half, we went up the chain of command. Took 15,000 petitioners, 50 congressional signatures on a letter to Secretary of Defense Gates at the time. It took pressure from the White House. It took the community, massive amount of community effort just to get one guy in. And then I got my accommodation, and it was bittersweet because it was just me. I remember being very angry at the time that, we went through all this effort. I mean, God, $500,000 of effort just to get one guy in, and I thought that wasn't fair. So over the next 10 years, we worked very hard, very diligently to change policy, and we did. Last year, we were successful in pushing forward Army Policy 2017-03, which changes AR 670-1 and AR 600-20, uniform guidelines in the military that now allows Sikhs to serve with their turbans and beards freely, once again. Because before the 1980s, thank you. It wasn't me that did it. It was the community's effort. But once again, Sikhs could now proudly hold up our identity. And we changed this policy, not just for ourselves, but we changed it for Muslims, for Jews, for Christians, for all religious minorities that wanted to practice their faith freely and serve their nation proudly. So that's what I was really proud about. Because when Sikhs fight, we fight not just for ourselves, we fight for everyone. 100 years ago. And we're fighting a lot of those same battles today. And I hope you all enjoy the film.
To the stage is Bicky Singh, the producer of All Quiet on the Home Front. He is the founder and CEO of a computer services company, but his passion is Sikh heritage. He is also an art collector. I hear he has quite a turban collection. I haven't seen it yet. For 20 years, he's pursued this passion, and what has he done? He has created a Sikh film festival in several venues, including Hollywood's famed Egyptian Theater. And then this program was merged with the prestigious film school at Chapman University in Southern California. The director of this film is a third-year MFA student at Chapman University. Originally from Cincinnati, he earned a degree in biomedical engineering. He was on his way to medical school when he also got into the top 3 film schools in this country. Harjus realized that whoever replaced him in med school would do the same job as him. But then he wondered if the person who would replace him in the film school would champion the Sikh identity. He made his choice.
The foundation is 20 years old, but we were in the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood as an independent film festival. And one of the things we noticed, Sikh stories were not being told in the mainstream. And our community was not there in the films. And students were not getting into the films area. So there were no one to tell our stories. So one of the suggestions came from our foundation was to get our organization embedded into a film school. So we started a scholarship program at the Chapman University's film school. So now it is a 2-semester course. It's called Project S. It is taught by a tenured professor. And that is at the undergraduate level.
And originally I had a bunch of other ideas kind of kicking around that didn't necessarily involve Sikhs per se. But so we're each assigned a mentor. So my mentor he wrote and directed like Major League and The Sting. He's an Oscar-winning screenwriter. And he basically said, do something that you don't think anyone else will let you do. Do that now.
Waris Aluwalia was in Mexico, and he was getting prepared to board an Aeromexico flight and was asked to remove his turban, and he refused.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
And then what happened?
He refused, and he could have taken another flight. He could have taken another airline, because this wasn't even TSA. This was at the gate. He had already gone through TSA, and then at the gate, they're like, no, we don't want you on the plane. So he's like, you know what, screw this. I'm going to stay in Mexico until this airline lets me on this flight. Right? He could have taken a Delta. He could have taken any other airline. But he decided to take a stand. Now, granted, unfortunately for the production, we went from like 2 weeks of rehearsal to him showing up the day before. But then from the other side, I was like, now you know this character better than I do. Now you know what it means to take a stand, even if it means that you might lose something personally. Because he didn't have to do that, right? Like he had enough money just to buy another ticket or whatever. Whenever I try to put a Sikh into a film, I want the audience, regardless of their background, to think for a second, you know what, if I was in that situation, I might do the same thing too. Because instantly they're relating to a character that looks nothing like them because we're human, right? And that's where, we can break those stereotypes.
It's interesting, we are celebrating now the 100th year anniversary of Bhagat Singh Thind's service.
Yes.
He joined in 1918. And so here we are a century later having a lot of the same discussions. There was a IED blast just off post, and a bunch of Marines were hurt. And so they choppered them in, and we took care of them. They had some pretty bad injuries, but one of them that I started working on and took care of grabbed my hand as he was leaving, and he said, "Thank you, brother." And that meant a lot to me. That my Marine brother is wounded here, doesn't care that I have a turban, that I have a beard. He just cares that I did a great job taking care of him. And most soldiers that I've spoken with over the years have shared that sentiment. I mean, I personally never had any bad experiences with any of the boots on the ground. They understand that this is not a big deal. In fact, when one of my unit members during my deployment said, I don't even see your turban and beard anymore. I just see the flag on your shoulder. And we're helping to push policy changes sort of at the top level, because if if the military, being the largest employer in the United States, can tell us that, hey, you are not, your appearance is not professional.
A quote by a contemporary writer in the 21st century, Robert D. Kaplan, who has written on a variety of political, historical, and sociological issues. In an essay he wrote just in recent years called The Danger of Peace, he comments on World War I and says, "Until World War I, war was a respectable endeavor, even a noble one, for war as well as peace often meant progress. What would humanity have become without rebellions? World War I delegitimized war because its horror was too vast to be justified by any result, especially one so meager, because a closed elite of generals and diplomats had led humanity into such depths. The result was the population of international studies, or the birth of modern political science." What would be your comments or viewpoint on that particular outlook on World War I and the general issues of how wars are fought since then?
You're putting me on the spot now. Well, look, as a soldier, I'm speaking on my own behalf, so none of my comments are reflective of the U.S. Army or DoD. So if I say anything silly or stupid, it's on me. But having said that, war is. Everybody says war is horrible, but you never truly understand it or appreciate that until you've been there.
I'm sure.
And you really, you're getting me all emotional. It's a horrible thing. So I think it's a necessary evil, and it certainly has given birth to modern political science and our modern world. We frame everything in our modern era based on what's happened as a result of World Wars I and II. The recent conflict ending of the North Korean War, the Korean War, I think is a great example of our ability to continue to push diplomacy while also preparing for war. We should never give up the option to strike. I think we should always be prepared, and that's the soldier in me talking, but it's also the Sikh in me talking. We share a very, very long history of a warrior ethos in the Sikh faith, in the Sikh culture, and that's because our gurus, our teachers, taught us not just to stand up for ourselves, but to stand up for everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah. So in that sage soldier tradition, I see us being soldiers and being important in today's dialogue. So I'm glad that we were able to de-escalate North Korea. I wish we had more diplomacy. I think the work of the State Department is critical. But I love our military, and I think people don't realize that sometimes the work that we do in the military isn't just guns and planes and bullets. We do a lot of amazing humanitarian work.
Yeats Brown stated in a book he wrote called Martial India, "I have seen only two races in the world who really like fighting, the Sikhs and the Gurkhas. In peacetime, the Sikhs are difficult men to command, but put them in a hot corner and they live up to the title of Singh, which means lion." Harjus?
I mean, there's a lot that like the British tried to do with like trying to have this whole martial race aspect to the Sikh community that I think is very unbalanced.
Indeed.
For
That's
lack-
why I picked this quote.
For lack of a better term. But then there's also some aspect to this that I agree with, because one, there's more than one way to fight, and two, the British were an occupying force.
Absolutely.
And so I could imagine Sikhs being like, there's a lot of inequality going on. We may not be physically fighting, but we are politically fighting for, because I think this kind of gets, what I think kind of gets taken out of context is, in theory, what it means to be a Sikh and the principles of Sikhism,
Yes.
right? Like whenever everyone says, like, is this a Sikh movie?
Please
or-
feel free to elaborate on those. Yeah.
So what I mean by that is some of the principles of Sikhism that are at the bedrock are concepts like there is no caste system, right? Men and women are equal in every facet of life, society, and politics.
Am I correct that there are now Sikh women serving in the U.S. military?
Oh, yes. For actually, there's many, many more Sikh women serving in the military than there are men.
Indeed.
I mean, and it's something that's been in Sikh history since the beginning. I mean, not only have we had Sikh women soldiers, we've had Sikh women generals commanding regiments of men, and they fall in line. One, I believe you have a painting of my Pagal,
I'll be addressing that shortly, yes.
right? So when it comes to fighting for these principles, usually most politics, most occupying forces don't adhere to that. So in one perspective, I'm like, okay, they're only giving one facet of like, okay, we're just these crazy guys with swords and, you know, fighting left and right, but also what it means to fight not only physically, but also politically and with your words. I kind of agree with that, and that's something that I think that we should consistently live up to, that we don't always live up to, of having equality for men and women, not only in our own society, but also fighting for that outside of the gurdwaras, outside of our homes, along with within our homes. Like, we don't always live up to these principles of Sikhi, of, for lack of a better term, fighting for what is correct, what is right.
It is an ideal that one always strives for, am I correct?
Yes, but the thing is, it's very hard for me to sometimes have conversations with people who don't always, like, they'll be just, everyone justifies what they do. I could be completely wrong. I may just justify the BS that I do also, but like in Sikhism, it's very explicit of like, you cannot judge someone based upon their family. You cannot judge someone based upon how much money they have. That's an arbitrary system. You cannot judge someone based upon what gender they are, what gender that they choose. These are things that are in the bedrock of Sikhism. I don't know how many people have seen the film Dunkirk, right? So it was the last stand for the British, right? How many people saw Sikhs or any brown characters in that film? The thing was, if you look at the history, so the support system for that evacuation was Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus, all together, by the way, all kind of taken from India. They were the last ones out. They were actually providing the barrier between the British and the Germans. They were the ones that allowed for the British to get pushed out. They were providing the support. And we didn't see that. Now, I get it, it's a movie and stuff like that, but it being portrayed as this is history, this is...
Right.
That, I mean, that's the narrative that gets pushed. And if that was reality, cool, but the fact of the matter is that wasn't reality. There were a lot of Sikhs, there were a lot of Hindus, a lot of Muslims there, and this is where we want to portray that, you know what, we had a part in this history, we had a part in this fight.
And in our exhibition, we will see actual photographs from a century ago that show those Sikh soldiers in every venue of World War I across the Eurasian continent and into North Africa, thousands of miles from their homeland.
Yeah, in fact, Sikhs were all over the European and Asiatic battlefields. We were in Tripoli, we were in North Africa, there were places that were considered missions that were considered impossible, and those are the missions that Sikh and Gurkha regiments were sent to, and a lot of them perished, but a lot of them did not.
It is the fifth largest global religion. Its history and beliefs are not widely understood. The fundamental tenet of Sikhism is God is one. This pervasive deity can be found everywhere, in everything, and in everyone. Hence, the fundamental second tenet of Sikhism is the equality of all beings, man or woman, rich or poor, of any race, caste, or social standing. It was a radical, perhaps even heretical statement in medieval Indian society, which was rigidly ordered by caste, creed, gender, and entitlements, but spiritual guidance would be drawn from the Holy Book, or Guru Granth Sahib. The Sikh Holy Book is divided into three parts: liturgical, meditative, and celebratory. Much of the text is set in hymns, arranged in musical scheme. The writings and deeds of the gurus that followed the first are in remarkable consonance with each other. Yet at the same time, social norms underwent change. An example is the greater respect and freedom for women as expressed in the Guru Granth Sahib. Of a woman we are conceived, of a woman we are born. To a woman we are betrothed and married. It is a woman who is friend and partner for life. It is woman who keeps humanity going. Why should we deem a woman cursed and condemned when from a woman are born leaders and rulers? Miri means commander or prince and refers to temporal power or civil authority. Piri means saint, holy man, or spiritual guide. These terms are used together to refer to the correlation or the balance between the material and spiritual realms. The 10th guru is almost always portrayed riding a horse and wearing a sword. He assumed characteristics of a spiritual as well as a temporal leader who had specific military responsibilities. He was a great man of letters himself and filled his court with many poets and translators. He formalized the order of the Khalsa, or the saintly soldiers, to defend righteousness. Much of the narrative of his life is devoted to descriptions of various battles which he led. A quotation from Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, expresses the role of military strength succinctly. When all efforts to restore peace prove useless and no words avail, lawful is the flash of steel. It is right to draw the sword. Approximately 1.5 million troops served in combat, rallying in great numbers in support of the British monarch, King George V. Sikhs formed only 1% of the Indian population at that time, but constituted over 20% of the British Indian Army. This is an original photograph and frame from World War I. It is on loan to us from Dr. Jagrup Singh Brar, an Arizona resident. Dr. Brar told me this story last year, and I quote from him. My great-grandfather, Jog Singh Gill, was killed in action during World War I. At the time of his death, he was Naib Sebedar, or junior commissioned officer, the third highest rank possible in the British Army. I am unsure of the year of his death, but I was told he was deployed to France, then sent to fight against the Turks, and may have been killed at Basra. He lifted his head out of a trench and was killed instantly. He was survived by his widow and 2 young children, one an infant, the other about age 4 or 5. As a result, his widow suffered a life of poverty and struggled to raise her 2 children. Thank you so much to Group Singh Brar for sharing this precious family heirloom with us in our gallery. Ranjit Singh, who lived from 1780 to 1839, was a noteworthy missile leader who fostered peace and tolerance among Hindus, Muslims, Europeans, and Sikhs. He became the Maharaja of Punjab in 1801, abolishing capital punishment and promoting secularism, following a period of invasions and turmoil in the region. Ranjit Singh commanded an army of 150,000 soldiers, 30 of whom were from Napoleon's army. After his death, chaos led to 2 wars and the annexation of the Punjab by the British in 1849. Prince Alexis Saltykov was born in St. Petersburg and served in the Russian Foreign Service in Constantinople, Athens, London, Florence, Rome, and Tehran. Upon his retirement in 1840, he made 2 voyages to India. In 1849, he published a selection of his letters accompanied by his drawings of Sikh martial traditions. Their popularity led to the production of lithographs, the personality of Mai Bhago. She was a Sikh woman who led Sikh soldiers to fight against the Mughals of India in 1705. She killed several enemy soldiers on the battlefield and is considered a saint warrior by Sikhs. She and her men caused the enemy to retreat while the forces of Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, showered arrows on the Mughals from nearby ground. When the Guru visited the battlefield, he found all dead except Mai Bhago, who he took care of to nurse her wounds. She later became the Guru's personal bodyguard, wearing male attire. Amidst a field of floral pattern, on one side is the Hindu goddess Durga, an invincible warrior riding a tiger, and the other side, which you see here, shows a radiating sun, symbolizing victory of the forces of light over darkness. The government and military under Maharaja Ranjit Singh and his successors were multi-faith, composed of Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. Phoenix Art Museum is deeply honored to have the Dr. Darshan Singh and Ajit Kaur Kanuja and Mr. Jaswant Singh and Mohinder Kaur Sikh Art Gallery devoted to the presentation of Sikh art to promote better understanding of its tenets and history. We are deeply indebted to the vision that led to the creation of a dedicated space in our museum where everyone in our community and beyond can learn about Sikhism. Thank you and good afternoon.